For everyone enjoying this recorded at the library, welcome to Become a Professional Video Game Player, a guide to eSports. Over the next hour, we're going to talk about what is it like to play video games professionally for a living in the year 2023. Things have always been shifting around. There are new games, there are new ways of getting in, and it's becoming more and more accepted all around the United States and the world. So a little bit about me. My name is Josh Bycer. I run the website and channel Game Wisdom. For more than a decade now, I've been examining the art and science of games. I've interviewed designers, journalists, people in the industry from all around the world. And my kind of, I guess, like mainstay or claim to fame is being the middle ground between the consumer side and the designer side. And you'd like to follow more of my work and things that I do, there'll be a slide at the end of our talk. Esports and playing video games professionally has come a very, very long way. This screenshot is from 1972, and this was the very first video game tournament for the game Space War, which for everyone watching this recorded, I am sure none of you have any idea what that game is. This is an actual screenshot, or the screenshot itself is from the movie The King of Kong, A Fistful of Quarters. This was a movie that was documenting kind of the high score shenanigans surrounding the game Donkey Kong and the person who held the record for the longest time, Billy Mitchell. And I believe he is, if my mouse cursor is coming up, is this guy right here, like with his eyes closed. But that was probably one of the more famous stories that have come out of the video game industry side, or I should say game competition side. Now, when we were looking at back in the day, the site that was considered the de facto name was Twin Galaxies. They were kind of like the Guinness World Records of high scores for the video game industry from the 80s. I honestly don't know if they're still going on today. Part of the reason for that is how much video game competition has changed over the years. These three scores were from when they were held kind of a local thing in my area back in like 94, 95. I went there and I placed second in the world at this game, which I can tell you, guarantee that my records have probably been destroyed by now by everyone else who's probably picked up these games.
Well, for now, though, yeah.
Yeah. But here is something again, like for kids and teens watching this recorded, they have no idea what any of these images are. But from the 80s into the early 90s, when people thought about what video game competitions meant, they were looking at things as being a high score challenge. So the image on the left was from Nick Arcade, probably the most popular like video game playing contest show of the 90s, long before we would ever think about recording and showing esports. The image in the middle is from Super Mario, is from The Wizard, aka the movie that was just a commercial for Super Mario Brothers 3. And then the image on the right, which I also have on the next slide, because apparently YouTube does not let me embed videos of that specific show, is Starcade. Starcade was pretty much the first TV show about playing video games. Like Starcade itself was an actual arcade, and people would answer trivia questions, play against each other, and see who would win at the end of a 30-minute show. And I can tell you right now that there is no esport today that would have an old man in a suit giving narration during an esport event. Now, when we began to see kind of the rise of competition here in the United States, this began to kind of materialize in the early 90s. Blockbuster, another name for any kids watching, they have no idea what I'm talking about, held the World Game Championships in the early 90s. This was kind of like a high score challenge meant to see who would get the highest score on specific games. They held two tournaments in 1990 and 1994. So the cartridge that you see over here, these cartridges were specially made by Nintendo, that they would record. You would hit that little number, that little switch. You can see it kind of right here in the corner. And whatever switch you would set to would be what game would be played. And then the game will record, your high score for game 1, 2, 3, 4. Whoever has the high score would win and move on to regionals and then the world and to fame and glory back in the 90s. As a fun trivia, if you can find these cartridges like in a swap meet or at some like a used place, they are apparently incredibly rare and incredibly valuable. So it could be something fun for the bargain bin hunters watching. But let me try and skip that. There we go. But when we began to see what would become true esports, that occurred in 1991 with the rise of the fighting game genre. Street Fighter 2, and this is a game I talked about in my presentation on the arcade industry, is one of the top 3 most profitable arcade machines of all time. This is a game that has many people consider saved the arcade industry as they knew it back in the 90s and would become kind of the standard and the blueprint for fighting game design, well, to this day. So the major point about Street Fighter and fighting games and how it changed kind of competition was that you were not playing kind of separately. It's not a case of I play the game, I step off, you play the game, whoever has a high score wins. We're playing the game at the same time. And the brilliance that Capcom, the developer who made this, came up with was they're still getting a quarter about every 90 seconds, maybe like a little bit more than 2 to 3 minutes of gameplay. But whoever wins the match gets to stay on the machine. So they still get money. The person who wins basically gets all the free games they could play, and everyone walks away happy except for the one who loses each match. And there, like back in the 90s, there were arcades where the line was just like wrapped around the corner of people trying to take on who was the top player, knock them off the machine, and then they just basically stayed on. I did this one time, it waited like 15 minutes, and I got crushed and just sent packing. And that was the last time I tried to take anyone on in Street Fighter. But Street Fighter 2 is one of the most popular games, and here is some footage for the kids. And first, I'm going to make sure that we are still recording. Yes, we are. And fingers crossed that this will actually play sound, but we shall see. So, can you hear this?
No.
Okay, let me see if I can. This has always been like the weird thing with Zoom. Like sometimes I have yet to figure out like the key to making sound play, but
Yeah.
I will have to take a look at that. Let's see, maybe if I hit this, mute video, my video settings, switch to phone, leave computer, to speakers, speaker, yeah. Yeah, this has always been that very weird issue. Use separate audio. No. Like I know someone told me that there's a way to make it, but every time I do it, it just does not want to work. Oh well. All right. Well, I can at least show the footage. Let's see. Oh wait, here it is. Share sound. Maybe this will. Let's see. Will this actually work? As soon as I get this out of the way, there. Okay, let's see. Will it work now?
Yeah, there it is. Yep.
Hey, I finally got it. Okay, so let me get this back here. So this is, of course, Street Fighter 2 in play with some of the most like famous sounds of Hadoukens and Shurikens firing off in the background. But while this footage is being played, this became kind of the format for every fighting game ever made. 2 players, health bars in the upper left and upper right, and whoever knocks them out first will win. And things have only gotten more advanced from this little footage here, but this is the game that basically set the entire scene in motion. And we have other footage I'll be showing. Now that we have sound, we can actually hear it later on. But Street Fighter 2's popularity would lead to the Battle by the Bay tournament. This was held in 1996, and I believe this was San Francisco, or I think it was in California, somewhere there. And then this led to the formation of the Evo Championship Series, a name that is going to come up quite a bit later on in this presentation. Today, we have multiple fighting games all play at the competitive level. While not everyone is as famous as Street Fighter, they all have their respective tournaments, or they may appear at the Evo, kind of under like the Evo banner. And as I said, Street Fighter 2 laid the groundwork for what has become the standard for fighting games. Sure, that's good. Okay. And what was one of the more famous examples? And now that the sound is working, I actually show this all for real. This is one of the things that got people really excited about playing games at the master level. So let me fast forward here. So what's about to happen, or actually I'll let this play out and you can see it, is that the player Daigo, who's playing as Ken, is probably pulling what people thought is an unwinnable solution. And things are not going to go as everyone planned. You're going to see that right now. See, no one thought this was actually possible to do.
Oh.
And it led to everyone going crazy at Evo for this. The funny thing is that Daigo, the one who did this, he did end up losing Evo, but this moment has become crystallized. The actual parry is now referred to as it says in my little preview window, the Daigo parry. And the player he was going against, Justin Wong, it has haunted him ever since. Like when he streams games and he streams Street Fighter, he's always nervous when someone plays Ken and they're going to do the Daigo parry against him. And it has become like so famous that it's now like a tutorial lesson, some of the later Street Fighters that teach people how to pull that off. But yeah, just one of the many moments. And again, it's one of the things that has people excited about fighting games and playing them at the master level. So this is not completely accurate. I'll probably have to update this by the end of this year, as we have even new fighting games that have been released, such as Street Fighter 6 and Mortal Kombat 1, which I know if you see in the bottom left there, it says Mortal Kombat 11. They went 9, 10, 11, and now they're back to 1. And a whole lot of things we don't have the time to get into explain, like that kind of convention there. But besides fighting games, another popular aspect of competitive play is StarCraft or real-time strategy games. The original StarCraft was released in 1988 and is considered like top 50 of the best-selling games and best video games of all time. This was the game that was picked up heavily by South Korea, and South Korea for the longest time was considered like the mecca of esports. They were treating their esports players as celebrities and sports stars way before anyone else was going to do that. There were yearly kind of grandmaster championships of StarCraft. The players became again famous. And unfortunately, StarCraft and its sequel, StarCraft 2, are not as popular as they were back then. There's still a following, but it is not as big of a deal. So here's another moment, and I'm going to see if I can fast forward right to it. I'm going to make this a little bit lower here. And I cannot begin to explain what is happening. The thing about StarCraft is that it is very micro-intensive. Like, you need to be hitting keys, like I think it's like 100 to 150 keys per minute of just playing this. And surely someone watching this recording right now may be able to actually commentate what's going on. But I think the guy in the bottom of his mouth is open is either happy that happened, or he may be the one that just got inflicted on. But yeah, StarCraft, like anything like super like that level was beyond me in terms of playing these games.
Yeah.
But what makes an esport game? Because this is something that is very important. for many people who play these games professionally, they're always looking for the next esport, and many developers and publishers are looking to become that next esport. In the 2000s, there was a huge push by many studios to kind of force their games into the esports space. The last slide that I showed you for StarCraft, the biggest competitor to StarCraft was the series Command and Conquer. And they tried to really make it an esport. This was back in like 2003, 2004, did not take off. The reason why many people want their game to become an esport was that there is a lot of money that goes into this. You have not only the increased interest of people buying these games, you have the various sponsorships, you have tournaments. These games that become esports names, they last for a very long time. But there are very specific conditions that need to be in place. Esports competitors prefer games that are not built on probability. So the idea is that if I punch you, that punch goes through. Like, we don't have to worry about checking a dice roll. This is not an RPG. I hit you, you take damage, you block it, you don't take damage. And there have been esports that have tried to kind of shoehorn those elements in, such as, oh, we can let characters wear, like, I don't know, different clothing that makes them punch harder or jump higher. And the fighting game community shut that down. They refuse to play games like that. And there have been non like competitive games that have been tested, but what people have come to see and what they expect is a competition. They want to see player A or team A versus player B or team B. And the idea is that every character should behave the same way, regardless of who's controlling it. There's I can ramble on about game design for like the next hour, so I'm resisting that urge. But a major aspect of these games is the idea of asymmetrical balance. So that, like, if you look in the bottom right hand corner there from the game Injustice, Superman obviously fights differently than Batman. But if I'm playing as Superman and you're playing as Superman, we'll have the same skills, we have the same abilities. So they want that kind of level of symmetry. They don't want to be like, oh, if I play as Batman, my Batman throws batarangs 5 times faster, but your Batman kicks harder. They don't want that. And they especially don't want anything that can be an advantage that you have to spend money on. The only exception to that is if we're talking about new characters who get introduced, and you may have to pay like $4.99 for one, maybe $10 for like a pack of new characters, that kind of thing. And one of the biggest evolutions of esports today is the rise of a spectator mode or a commentator mode. This is part of the reason why they become big business, is by having these modes, it allows people to broadcast games and kind of provide more information or kind of explain what is happening. And there are plenty of people who become famous because of this. A famous StarCraft player who goes by the name of Day9, when he stopped playing them professionally, he got into broadcasting and commentating on games, and he became one of like the biggest broadcasters for esports. And he also hosts the yearly PC Games trade show, which is kind of like the trade show for upcoming PC games. Now, there are esports for anything. And so this is footage that I took. This is from the Grand Series of Tetris in 2016. And they're still running Tetris tournaments even to this day. And I have said this every time when I show this footage. I am terrible at Tetris. You would think someone like me who can play like all the Souls likes, all the first person shooters, Doom, you name it, would be good at this game. No, I am terrible when it comes to Tetris.
Right.
I mean, I'm pretty good, but then I'm more of a casual gamer, so
Mhm.
I could never play any of the Souls games. I can watch people play and understand what's happening, but it's like I
Mhm.
can't. I would die immediately.
Nice bird.
Mhm.
And with Tetris, yeah, it's like it's soothing in a way. It's just like, oh yes, I'm just gonna make these lines.
little cleanup
Yeah.
needed though to get
And it's
himself out.
again, it's
I mean,
like the
Jonas has been
oddest
released
thing. Like
before
I can
now,
play
Yeah.
so
but
many
the
like
cap is actually getting
advanced
wider.
games. This is just
Jonas
like
looking for a tuck.
it might as well just be trying to learn
again.
another language. Like I can,
Yeah.
my
Sounds like
brain
it's
does
both
not
these.
seem to want to
He's very
play
cleared
this.
with
But yeah,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
this is like
Congratulations, James, for that
championship
LPS. You
level
got it
Yeah,
right
there.
Jonas is
here.
actually way
Yeah, this is good. This is because like Tetris, I think anymore, like it's
Jeff.
probably the game I play the most. It's just
Oh,
like if I'm like
100,000
riding my stationary bike, like I have Animal Crossing or like the new Pokemon Snap, but like yeah, I mean this is just the thing where it's like, well, it's right there, and I don't have to start the Switch, and it's like you can just pick it up and put it down so easy.
Mhm.
catch up.
Yep.
Yeah, it's very satisfying. That's I guess Tetris too. They've done studies about how it helps people with PTSD,
Mm.
which is
Yep.
kind of fascinating. Like, oh yeah, okay, this kind of helps like your brain close loops and things, which is part of game design, or depending on the game, obviously.
Yeah.
Fun though, yeah, no, and okay, so it's 36. This is a long one, but again, like I will watch people. I have watched people play Animal Crossing
Yeah.
for like, oh, especially in 2020, it's like, hey, this person's playing Animal Crossing for 3 hours. Sounds good.
Hmm.
And there's no competitive. It's just like I'm gonna go, to my friend's island. Like, yeah, nice.
And for me, my like soothing game is playing stuff like Dark Souls and Doom. Like those are my relaxing games when I'm fighting on the highest difficulty.
Well, and it's like, and watching other people do that is, yeah, that's fine for me. But it's like,
Mhm.
yeah. That's
I
I know. I played Duke Nukem on PC back in the 90s, and that was kind of it for me.
And they are still making a lot of those boomer shooters to this day as well.
Okay.
All right. But we'll have more of some of the other games later on. But one of the most important things for teens watching this to understand is the concept of the meta. This is a term that can strike fear in the hearts of anyone trying to play a game competitively. Meta or meta game or meta play, as it can be referred to, is kind of the game outside of the game. This refers to the popular trends, what's hot, what's not in any particular game. This is oftentimes what is deduced and then kind of disseminated among competitive players to everyone else. If everyone knows that red magic in Magic the Gathering is like the best possible build or best popular deck style, then the meta will kind of shift to everyone playing red style decks. And what will end up happening is that when the meta becomes fixed for too long, it turns the game into two different ways of playing. You either completely adhere to the meta, or you build a deck that's completely against the meta, and anything else will simply not work. When we look at kind of competitive video games, they are very much the first kind of live service games that we saw because they had to become live service. They needed new content coming regularly. They needed things to be changed or updated so that nothing remained the best for long. And you can see this in any kind of competitive game, and especially if it's like a TCG or CCG or collectible card game like Hearthstone here, Marvel Snap, and so on. Like Marvel Snap, they release, I think, like a new card like every like 2 to 3 weeks, which that is a crazy amount of turnaround for a game like that. And it has to happen because without these updates, people will just get tired of these games. And Hearthstone ran into some issues during its first year with what was considered the most popular deck at that time, which was called Miracle Rogue, which that got nerfed and stamped into the ground once they kind of like had to fix that card. But that is kind of the nature of playing these games competitively. You have to be aware of, okay, is there a new character coming? Is there going to be a change to how certain things behave? Even fighting games will have these updates. Street Fighter has famously released different versions of their games that will either add in new characters or balance and change certain aspects. So, like Street Fighter 2 had Street Fighter 2 Alpha, Street Fighter 2 Turbo, Street Fighter 2 Championship Edition. They just kept adding more and more adjectives to it. So, what we're going to talk about over the next few minutes is the current top three major properties. And I'm saying that currently because things can change. Sometimes they can change because people move on to another game. Sometimes they can change because a new game in that series comes out. Or they can change because the developer just says, well, we don't want to support it anymore. But the big three that we're going to talk about, you are guaranteed to have a esports following and be able to find a way in if you're interested in them. But like I said, there are esports for just about any game out there if you look hard enough for them. While the smaller ones won't be earning you millions of dollars for sure, they can still provide a way to get your feet wet and maybe build up your reputation in that space. So, one of the oldies at this point, but still one of the most popular, is League of Legends. League of Legends was developed by Riot Games and released in 2009. At the time, it was released without any purchase whatsoever, and people were just wondering what is wrong with this company for releasing a game completely free. And it turns out they were ahead of everyone else. And thanks to its very high skill intensive gameplay, frequent updates of new champions, changing champions, and so on, it became one of the most recognizable esports. Not only is it one of the most recognizable esports, it has gone into other properties and brands as well. I think it was last year or the year before that, they had the hit show on Netflix, Arcane. They've put out cover bands of like characters like doing like metal albums. There is a lot to League of Legends beyond just playing the game today. Now, League of Legends, and one of the things I didn't mention this before, but I want to clarify. Every esport has its own rules and kind of formation of its championship or grand tournaments. So if you're interested in one of these games, you'll have to follow their structure and look it up. League of Legends has what's called their championship series, and this is based out of the North American and European leagues. How this works is that teams, you do not play League of Legends professionally as a solo person. Teams will sign up for each season or each kind of championship season in that kind of like specific time frame. The teams that earn the most points out of their respective brackets will get invited to the championship series. And the championship series is kind of like the big deal. That is the world area or the world tournament. In 2016, more people watched the league finals than they did the NBA finals. So the prize pool, and this is something that is very important to understand for teens watching. When you hear big numbers like this tournament has a prize pool of 2.3 million, this one has 10 million, 5 million, whatever, that doesn't mean the first place team gets that money. How these tournaments work is that the prize pool is earned from either people spending money or buying stuff at the tournament, from sponsors, from the developer, anyone like that. The prize pool is then kind of split between the top teams. So if the top prize or the prize pool was 2.23 million, number one may take home $600 to $800,000. Team two may take home like 400, 500. And again, it will keep going down as we place lower and lower in that respect. But again, the higher the prize pool, the more overall money the winners will be receiving. So this is footage from the 2023 League Game Finals. And I can guarantee you that I could not explain to you what is happening in this game. I am, as a bit of a curse for me, it seems like single player games I am fantastic at. Any kind of competitive game I am just horrible at playing. So League itself is a game where very little can happen, and then everything happens all at once, and one team is kind of left defeated and sent back to their home base. The general gameplay of this is that every professional player controls one character. So the five icons you see over here, these are five individual players, five over there. Each team is controlling a corner of the map, and they're trying to push through the middle to the opponent's base, and whoever gets to the opponent's space and destroys their kind of like main nexus, they will win and take home the prize. Matches can last like 30 to 40 minutes. They could last an hour and a half to 2 hours, depending upon what is going on. Because everyone is gaining more and more power as they play, eventually what's going to happen is that one team is going to just destroy them and gain a lot of ground, and then it will become harder and harder for the losing team to kind of recoup. Sometimes you can have teams just destroy them so fast that they can't even like respond in time. We'll see if I can fast forward to anything that looks like super chaotic or exciting. But yeah, like it's a very big deal when everyone meets to try and fight, because this is how teams will gain a huge lead or end up losing if they're not careful. And yeah, it just turns into like fireworks of graphics sometimes.
It looks like it might just be Zika. He gets out with a nice little flash, and it's traded back and forth. First blood goes.
Wait, so that was the first. So that was 13 minutes of playing before one person was actually knocked out for a minute. Yeah, League of Legends and the other example, Dota 2 or Defensive Agents 2. That's the other kind of big example of MOBA. They were both very hard to play, but again, because they're completely free to get into, means that anyone can try and play. And we'll talk about what it means to prove yourself later on. The number 2, a kind of highest played esports right now, is Counter-Strike Global Offensive, or CSGO. This is extremely challenging and very fine-tuned first-person shooter gameplay. One team will play as the counter-terrorist, one team plays as a terrorist. The counter-terrorist must stop the terrorists from completing their job. After like 6 matches, the teams will switch roles, and whoever wins, or whichever team wins the most number of those matches, will win the kind of round or their respective tournament match. There is an economy system in game of people who will buy and sell weapon skins of all the weapons for real money, and it actually is very lucrative and potentially illegal in spots, with like a huge black market that goes on there. As a very funny point, this presentation may be the last time that I show this slide, as it was announced this year that they are actually going to be releasing a sequel, effectively named Counter-Strike Global Offensive 2, that will kind of become the new like benchmark or the new version of this game.
Yeah.
And as I said, when a series gets like the next game in the entry, the previous one will most likely fall out of favor. The only exception to this rule is if an entry has like unique rules or elements to it, such as, let's say, this one introduces a different kind of combat, then it may still get played compared to some of the later versions, but it will never be as popular because people will always like to chase the newest and greatest one. So the CSGO League is a little bit different compared to League. In this one, you have tournaments that are held all around the world. They are sponsored by many different publishers, many different companies. Some are co-sponsored by Valve themselves, and Valve is the creator of CSGO. E-League was one of the biggest organizers and sponsors. I'm not sure where they were. They were really growing big with showing some of their tournaments off in like 2018, 2019 on television. But each tournament will have different rules, who can compete, how many spots, what's the prize, and so on and so forth. Now, because of that, it means that if you want to have kind of like the big tournaments, how they usually set this up is that a major tournament will have a qualifier tournament. That is, whoever is like the top 2, top 3 of that tournament will earn a place in the actual tournament itself. And teams that are considered like number 1, number 2 at the higher tier version, they may just automatically earn a spot in next year's tournament. And you'll have to compete in many different ones. The kind of quote-unquote major CSGO one are the CS Majors. So this is their version of the League Championship Series. So we'll show up a little bit of footage here. Let's see if I can get it. And CSGO is even more chaotic to watch. And what they will often do in this is that they'll switch between footage of the actual players, and then they'll go into kind of like broadcaster view that allows you to see like the footage around them or see multiple things happening at once. And again, it is the same. Let me move that out of the way. So you can see the round up there. So there's 30 rounds in this match. Whoever wins the best of those 30 will take home, or they'll move on to the next thing. Or in this case, this is the grand final. So whoever wins this takes home the gold. And yeah, this is another game where it is very hard to get into if you're not already well adjusted to this. It has its own kind of physics and rules for its gameplay. And again, I also want to point out that we are looking at this through the broadcaster kind of overlay, so other players do not get to see where everyone else is on the map or what everyone else is doing down there. So this is there for the audience so they can see what is happening and understand, at least at some level, who's winning, who's losing, and so on. Let me get out there. Now, the number 3 that we'll talk about, it's kind of its own like amorphous collection. That is the fighting games. There is no one singular the fighting game that people play. The FGC, or the fighting game community, the top players will play multiple games. This will allow them to compete in multiple tournaments. It gets their name out to more places. And of course, it gives them a greater chance of earning more money and kind of sponsors along those lines. Because of that, the fighting game side is the one that shifts the most in terms of what games are being played. Excuse me. And this can change like every few months, every year. Evo, as I mentioned earlier in this presentation, they kind of set the stage for what games are being played. Because if Evo 2024 says, you know what, we're going to be playing Street Fighter 6 and Mortal Kombat 1, everyone knows those games need to be trained, practiced, and we're going to compete there. Now, Evo, like I said, this is the biggest name when we talk about what's considered the professional kind of esports scene, especially in the United States. The best thing about Evo, for any teens watching this, it is the only tournament that has full open enrollment. You do not need a team. You do not need to have any kind of qualifications to attend. I think they held it annually in Las Vegas. If you can show up and you can pay the entry fee, you can compete at Evo. And there have been years where someone who has no experience, who never showed before, either made it very far or even beat one of like the people who are expecting to win Evo. And that is a really great way to build your name and reputation if you just show up at Evo and take home top prize, or just eliminate one of the top competitors from it. So we have footage of what literally just happened in August. The Evo 2023, again, they have grand finals for all the major fighting games, but the biggest ones get center stage. So this is the Street Fighter 6 grand finals. And Street Fighter 6 just officially released. Ooh, I want to say, as someone who covers video games, I've lost all sense of time, but I want to say it just came out about a month or two ago right now. And they were practicing with early footage or early versions of it to get ready for Evo. So Street Fighter 6, again, it looks very similar to what we showed Street Fighter 2 earlier in this presentation, although there's a lot more things going on here. And yeah, like, one of the things I find very fascinating about fighting games, especially at the Grandmaster level, is that it is so much about momentum. There are matches where, like, the number 2 player in the world gets completely shut down. Like, they can't do anything. And you may think to yourself, wow, this person is just horrible at this game. But then on the very next round, then they perfect KO the opponent. And it really is about kind of sometimes just getting to that and understanding or trying to read what your opponent's about doing. Yeah, there's a lot of like footsies and trying to like guess, well, does he know I'm going to do this? Do they know that I know that they know that I know this point? And yeah, it can get again like extreme in terms of like some of these matches. Some of them can go into like a double sudden death in terms of who's going to take home the actual win. And I'll talk about this in the next slide or two, that figuring out who is like the number one player is kind of almost impossible when it comes to some of these fighting games and just the professional games in general. And we'll explain why in a second. I'll just let the rest of this round play out there. One of these days, people tell me I should try and learn a fighting game. Again, like I have no memory for like special moves and combos. And there's the Evo trophy as well that you can earn if you take home the top prize. And as I said, Mortal Kombat 1 just released about, I think it just released about yesterday, right now, or officially released. And Mortal Kombat 1 was not at EVO 2023, but I'm going to make a pretty safe bet that it's going to be at EVO 2024.
That makes sense. Yeah.
And again, you can just see like how quickly he took on that Ken when he was losing the other round. But yeah, this is a 23 minutes, so we're not going to play the whole thing here. Now, number 4 that has been in a very weird place, especially here on the East, or for me in the East Coast, has been Fortnite. Fortnite, about 3 years ago, was the kind of king of the game industry in terms of esports and just name recognition. It gave Epic Games, the creator, pretty much infinity money in terms of the revenue that it earned during its peak. It originally was not supposed to be this battle royale of like 99 people playing and whoever is the last one standing wins. They kind of took that from other games in the genre, the most famous being Player Unknown's Battlegrounds, or as it's more affectionately known as PUBG. But Fortnite being like the best looking and the easiest to get into, blew up. And while it is certainly not as big as it was like 2-3 years ago, it is still one of the most played games and one of the most profitable ones imaginable right now. So they feature a very similar structure of League of Legends with their Fortnite Championship Series. Each season, teams and players will play to earn points. Whoever earns the most points in their division or region moves on to the finals. Now, because Epic has lots and lots of money to throw at things, their prize pools are oftentimes higher than anyone else. They were really trying to make this a major esport. And in 2023, they had a prize pool of 10 million, which it may sound like a lot, but that may be like a day or two of them earning money at their peak when it comes to people spending in that game. And I can guarantee everyone watching this record right now, you will never see me in the grand finals at Fortnite. I am amazingly bad at this game, like surprisingly so. Again, considering I play so many first-person shooters, the whole kind of building thing just throws me for a loop in this game. When I was writing my book on the free-to-play game market, I decided to play Fortnite for the first time, and I did terribly in it. Let's see if I can fast forward to when it gets like really, really crazy. Yeah, like when people get like when combat really starts happening, it just turns into this like maze of building corridors and stairs. Lots and lots of stairs seems to be what I notice from people playing this game. Now, one thing that people like about with Fortnite as an esport is that there is a fixed end to these matches. You can, if you can see in the upper right-hand corner, you see that 20-second counter. You see, every few minutes when you play, the field shrinks. And it keeps shrinking more and more and more to the point where everyone is just literally on top of each other. So you can't just like hide forever. You have to engage. And what that means, of course, is that these matches are going to end because everyone will be so close to each other, it'll be impossible not to shoot and take them out. So mixed matches kind of very streamlined in that respect. Again, with League of Legends, Street Fighter, and so on, it can take a long time for a winner to be announced, especially if we go into sudden death or another sudden death, and so on and so forth. But I will move on here. And as I said, there are plenty more. As I said a few minutes ago, the reason why Fortnite was in like a weird place was back in 2019, before COVID shut everyone down. There were plans here on the East Coast, specifically in Philadelphia, that they were going to build a Fortnite stadium for people to play and compete in. And then when COVID hit, everything just kind of stopped. But there are plenty of other esports out there. All the major CCGs have their own tournaments. We have the Hearthstone Grandmasters. Magic has theirs. I'm sure there's going to be something for Marvel Snap if there isn't already one already. And again, if a game can be played competitively, chances are there may be a small or quite sizable esports surrounding it. And then here are just some of the major esports networks who will play, stream, and will sometimes fund and manage teams as well. And you can, of course, look them up for those of you watching this recorded to learn more about what games they're covering. So if you want to get into esports, which is kind of the point of our presentation, there are many rules to this besides just playing these games. There are people who will cover and interview teams. You have coaches, commentators, and more. But one of the biggest things you have to understand is that there is a massive difference between even playing these games really good among your friends or just being the game versus being able to compete at a tournament and esports level. So a major point, to go back to what I said earlier about recognizing who's the best and who's the worst, most games have adopted what's known as an ELO rating. This was something that was originally developed for chess, but has since become a standard for any kind of, or for most competitive driven games, especially those that are about like one person fighting another. How this works is that people are assigned a point score. When you go up against someone, the amount of points that are won or lost are based on the difference between the two players in terms of how much time has been spent, and of course, how many points they have. So if I start playing a game and for the first day, I am winning consistently, I am beating people who have been playing this game for months, if not years, I will shoot up the ELO ranking quite a bit. If I lose, I may just lose a few points at that point. If I'm a big name, if I'm, top 100, if I've been playing this game for months and years, if I lose against someone of like equal level, we may only lose like a few points here and there because we're so close. But if I lose to someone who's like the 50,000th player in the world, I'm going to take a massive hit because I shouldn't be losing to someone who's brand new. That's not what my points are supposed to say. And many games will establish different kinds of rankings based on certain point thresholds. So if I hit 30,000 points, I may be now considered a gold player at this game. If I hit 40,000, I could be a diamond. And every game has their own like settings and rules for this. And the big thing about this is that this is what professional teams, coaches, sponsors are going to look at if they're going to decide whether they're going to look at you or even give you like a moment's notice or even just a moment of their time. You can't just walk up to a team and say, I'm the 800,000th best player in the world, sign me up for a lifetime contract. Instead, you need to prove to people that you are the best, and this is how it happens. Now, for some of the games we mentioned today, League of Legends, CSGO, and so on, those games that are built on having a team, you cannot play them as an individual. And this is why many schools, colleges, and other places are trying to like build up teams for teens and so on, because this will allow them to kind of get their foot in the door for esports. And there are plenty of leagues that are formed among high schools and colleges. Here in New Jersey, we have, I think it's the Garden State Sports E Club or something along those lines. That they're kind of like the organization here that's trying to build up esports programs and teams all throughout the state. It can get very expensive. You have to worry about travel expenses, training. Many of the professional teams have their own team house where everyone will live there, train, and of course play day after day. And managing a team is way beyond what we're going to be talking about here. Now, you want to join a team. As I said a few slides ago, this is all about proving to people that you are deserving of that title. If you're wanting to be the best player or you want to join a really high team, you need to show them that you are consistently good. And this is, again, why a lot of the better-known esports have an LO rating, because this is basically your resume. You can talk the talk all day long, but if you're, bronze in a game and maybe you're like 385,000th in the world at it, they're not going to care about you. But if you are able to play these games well, if you're able to prove that you are consistently top 200, top 100, that is a really great way for people to then start noticing you and reaching out for employment, sponsorships, and more. And again, every game and every kind of esport has its own rules and regulations for how they measure things, how they let people in, and so on. And the same goes for sponsors. Many sponsors will attach themselves to major teams, major players, and of course, major tournaments. This is where a lot of that money comes from. And again, you're not going to reach out to any of these places and say, sponsor me. If they want you and you prove that you're good enough and you're, popular enough for them, they'll do that and they'll reach out on their end. So the good thing about getting into esports, it is, again, quite literally, you are getting paid sometimes lots of money to play video games daily. Over the past 4 to 5 years in particular, we've seen a greater acceptance and push to mainstream esports, specifically here in the United States. Again, in countries like Japan and South Korea, they have already been big and huge over there. But it really wasn't until like the last 5 to 7 years that we've seen more of that here in the United States, thanks to, again, stuff like EVO, E-League that was broadcasting games. And as a bonus, as I talk about in my presentation about how to get started on YouTube and become like a YouTube or a Twitch streamer, you can use those channels as a way to not only grow your own brand, but also get additional money as well. Because many of the top players will stream themselves playing these games so that people watching live can donate, they can get sponsorships from there. Then they may take those streams, edit that footage, make them a video on YouTube so they get ad revenue and deals over there as well. It's a very kind of like snowball effect that if you're big enough to win at tournaments, win at major championships, you can get a huge following on Twitch, which will then earn you even more money and recognition to then get big on YouTube. It's kind of like a way of like having all these plates spinning at once. The bad news, it can be very stressful, and it does mean you are playing the same game every day. These are like the people who train at these games, they are playing them consistently 6 to 8 or 8 to 10 hours a day in terms of practicing and getting ready for tournaments. And that can take a lot out of you because the barrier of entry for these games is just literally buy the game or download it. It means everyone can try it. And that means you have to do a lot harder to stand out. This is, again, where the LO side comes in. And because of how the industry can be shaken up by major events, you could wake up one day and not have an esport to play anymore. The game Heroes of the Storm, this was developed by Blizzard as their alternative to League of Legends, was very big. It actually had a kind of sizable following on the esports side. Then one day Blizzard announced, oh, we're not going to support it anymore. And that esport basically died within 24 hours. And again, this is why many people who play these games professionally, other than, again, of course, like the big ones like League of Legends or Counter-Strike, they will stick to, or they will play multiple games. Some of the more famous fighting game players like Justin Wong, Sonic Fox, and there's a few others I am forgetting, they will oftentimes play like 3 or 4 major games at a tournament. Again, so they're not just being pigeonholed into one game, and they have a greater chance of winning and earning prize money. But esports and sports are not the same. Well, like I said, we are seeing more schools and colleges offering esports programs and scholarships. Playing an esport is not the same as trying to learn football or golf. Esports are games that are constantly changing. We are not seeing a patch updates for football here anytime soon. And like I said, the competitors of these games, they'll train in different games in that genre. Most fighting game players are not going to be changing over to playing League of Legends at the same time. But like people who play collectible card games, they will oftentimes play 3 or 4 of them at the same time because they can then switch over to them. They can participate in different tournaments and so on. And again, esports generates far less fame outside of their fan bases compared to traditional sports. But as we've seen, they can certainly change. There were plans, again, before COVID hit, for the Tokyo 2020 Olympic Games to have an esports kind of competition there. But when everything got completely turned around and shut down, I don't believe that ever happened. But maybe we'll see that for the next event. So to wrap things up, esports as a whole is gaining more and more acceptance and mainstream appeal. Like I said, 15 years ago, no school in the United States will have thought about having an esports course or an esports club. Today, we're hearing more and more about it. And while it is certainly not for everyone who plays games, it really does highlight that there is a grandmaster level at any kind of competitive game. And while I do not think we're going to get the esport, that one game that's going to take it over and be it forever and ever and ever, we will at least see more games coming. We'll see more people trying to get into it. And who knows where this will be by the end of this decade. But with that said, again, with this being recorded, we may not have too many questions. But Emily, do you have any questions, I guess, about the eSport presentation?
I mean, I guess this is me being a very casual gamer, but somebody who enjoys watching things on YouTube, specifically video games like Nuzlocke runs and things like that mostly.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess from an esports perspective, what's your take on games that release new versions? So like Counter-Strike versus games like PUBG, where it seems like they just release new maps. And I guess that's true for Fortnite too. Like, which do you think is better for somebody looking to break into esports to focus on? I guess probably it's best to do a mix, but do you sort of have a take on if there's like a better way to kind of go?
Well, the games that tend to focus on just updating new content, they are probably going to be on the easier side for you to learn. Fortnite, what they've done is that every season, it's called like a chapter. And like their chapter will change the map, they'll change rules, new weird things to it. And that can certainly throw you for a loop if you're not expecting it or if it changes in a way that you don't like. It's kind of, again, it's an ever evolving nature of those games. But like I said, no matter what game that you're playing, things will always change. They do not want that meta to solidify. And you do have to kind of roll with the punches. CCG players are very much accustomed to this. Anytime there's a new expansion release, all the rules, all their thoughts about how to build a deck go out the window while they try and learn it. And that, again, is kind of like the appeal of those games. Because the other thing that I didn't really talk about is that there are esports players who give up playing games because they're not enjoying it anymore. if it just again comes down to, okay, I'm just going to play the same deck the same way for the next 8 months, they're not going to enjoy that, because people who play these games professionally, they love that element of competition. And we've seen games where it's either too confusing to play or it becomes so solidified that no one wants to get into it that people just give up and they stop playing it. The game Gwent, which was kind of like, it was in the position to be like number 2, number 3 in the CCG side about 4 years ago. Excuse me. They've announced that they are ending things in 2024. And a lot of it came down to people just not enjoying the game and just losing interest and losing competitive players. Because once a esport loses its competitive player base, that is often like the final nail in the coffin. Because if they can't get people to play, even if there are tournaments with prize money, then people aren't going to tune in to watch that, and then the sponsors pull out.
Well, and I guess esports too. Just when I mainly watched PUBG, it was back when Polygon did a thing called Awful Squad. And then that was like less about winning. It was more about, okay, we're going to be funny while we play this game. Like they famously only won a couple games ever, like even in years of streaming it. But yeah, I guess it seems like there's lots of ways to sort of make your mark in this or learn to get started. I don't know. It seems like, yeah, there's just, you could almost get paralyzed by choice, like what you want to focus on.
Yeah, and it really comes down to what kind of game you really like to play, and then just focusing on it. Now, there is, of course, the aspect of speed running and people who play like single player games or non-competitive games to see how good and how fast they can run through that. And speed running has become a very active community over the past like 15 years, but that is not an esport. Like there's no like professional speed running teams of games right now.
No, it seems like Pokemon Nuzlocke runs. That's not something you can do competitively. Like you choose the rules, like you can make a video, but yeah, that too is not esports.
Yeah.
No, but it's very interesting, and yeah, I was glad to hear. I just with the games you talked about, it's like, oh wow, yeah, it's interesting to see kind of what's really popular right now, because we used to do gaming, but we eventually just our equipment was obsolete and we donated it. It's that thing of like, well, most consoles anymore too. It's sort of, I mean, it seems like you need to have your own equipment. You need to have your own hardware and software, and that's what most people who are really into gaming, they get to that point.
Yeah, and the PC side has become more acceptable, or at least it's become a little bit easier to play like fighting games on the PC in the last like 5 to 6 years than it was like 15 to 20 years. So a lot of them were never ported at the same time, or the ports didn't work right. So it has become viable. But again, like for most people, if you're going to play these games competitively, you do need at least a decent setup.
You don't need like a massive gamer cooler, but you do need a computer, like a decent machine that will run graphics and things like that.
Yeah. Or you get like a PlayStation 5 or an Xbox One or whatever is like the current gen, and you can use that at least for like games that are on there. Again, you're probably not going to play Counter-Strike or League of Legends on PlayStation 5.
Yes, and I don't know. I mean, this is just because, again, like with our gaming stuff, we mainly get younger kids, and this was in the past, but it seems like, I don't know, as big as Roblox and Minecraft are there esports? Is that part of the esports world at all?
I know there's like some tournaments for Roblox, and again, like every game, there is that possible, but you have to look up on a game by game basis. One of the fighting games I had mentioned was Smash Brothers. Smash Brothers was not originally a competitive fighting game. Nintendo had no thought about that, but the fighting game community took to it, and it became one of the top games at Evo for Smash, and I got destroyed. I participated in a local tournament here, and like a 13-year-old boy he destroyed me in like 90 seconds of playing Smash. And I thought it was okay at the game.
Yeah, that's if you know, yeah. It's a fun game. And that's like the games the kids in my life play. I mean, they're playing Mario Kart, they're playing like different Mario games. And it's like between 5 and 10 years old, it's like, oh, yeah, they can get to a point really quick where, yeah, they know the controls, they can play. And then I can play against them as an adult and be like, oh, even though I've played this game a lot longer, we're still fairly evenly matched, if only because there's a very, like you said, very low barrier to entry.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Thank you, though. This was great, and I'm glad we have the recording, and I will put that out there. I will share it on our Facebook and YouTube channels if that works for you.
Yep, that is fine. So, like my last presentation, for people watching this recorded, if you enjoy things and want to follow more of my work and what I do, first, I have my books on design. My first book, 20 Essential Games to Study, is kind of my intro level. It's kind of how to be inspired by games. These are 20 of my favorites. While the Game Design Deep Dive series is my bread and butter, each book covers a specific genre, talking about the design, methodology, basically everything you ever want to know but were afraid to ask. The latest book on deck builders and CCGs will release in August. And right now we have a planned date for the end of October for my book on role-playing games. And right now I'm wrapping up my book on Souls-likes because, again, the Souls-like genre with Dark Souls and so on, those are the games that relax me when I play them. And you can find them pretty much like anywhere. They may even be a few at the library, and they are available just about wherever books are sold. And last but not least, for anyone watching this, if you want to get in touch with me, follow my work, send me a message, stuff like that, these are some of the best places to do that. I am still on Twitter X, at least for right now, but I'm also on Blue Sky under the same name. Send me an email. I am always happy to chat. If you have any suggestions for things to cover, anything that I missed, let me know, and I will update the presentations accordingly. But that is going to do it. So I'm going to turn off. Okay, I turned off my recorder.
Okay, I will do the same.